Hey everybody, welcome to the Art of the Deals. I am Brother Kenneth Deal, and it is time for yet another episode. On this one, we're going to talk about the problems with the church and getting help to the church. I outlined in another video that other denominations and faiths should go to the church for their spiritual warfare help. And then, of course, there's a reality, including that once there was the red tape was so bad that it took months and months, and I think it was their way of scrutinizing things because the exorcist list was very short, small, and now it's pretty much, well, it's not every diocese as the Pope once mandated, Pope Benedict, but the fact is that it's still processed because of, we'll just say, the desire, the will to assist from some individual priest. So you're going to have to bypass them to some certain extent. But let's go into a little more detail on this. First, how do you approach, and then who to approach? Well, approach them the same way. If you have a good relationship with your priest, you shouldn't have so much difficulty as if you have been away from the church for a long time and you're approaching the priest or parish for the first time in a while or the first time period. The protocol is how to ask for it. Don't go in there and ask for an exorcism directly. We've said this for years and years, to not do that because, well, if you're worried about the priest and whoever getting concerned, the first thing they're going to think, as we do, because it's usually true, when someone asks for an exorcism, it makes them sound kind of off. We'll just say at least in kind of a mental way instead of a spiritual way. Because even the diocese that have it together and have their own office of exorcism, they still get rubbed the wrong way by that direct request. So let the church determine that. If the church is going to determine that, it won't be in such a way that that's their excuse for not expediting the case and all of that stuff. I don't want that to be any more of an excuse than anything else because they're supposed to help you. But we want to try to come off as less mental as possible because the church's job is spiritual, not mental. I think that too many times it's a mental case, and they know that because they'll start getting their red flags. Kind of like if the cop is asking the guy he pulled over some basic routine questions, and some red flags are coming up. He's either drunk, and we're going to expect people, to be logical, to be critical thinkers and so forth. So don't give them any food for thought on this kind of stuff. Okay, let's go back to this. The protocol first is what I'm talking about, is don't ask for an exorcism. But you say, what do I ask for then? You could just say, I need some spiritual warfare counseling. It does detail what you need, because in the least you're going to need spiritual warfare counseling. And if you're able to call somebody on the phone or contact them or show up in person, don't go by yourself, I would say, too, because, and don't bring somebody like Crazy Larry, some friend of yours, who seems off by default. Bring your wife or somebody who's rather pleasant and sane, because that's going to make your case. I'm talking about people, somebody's are more extreme. They actually think they are possessed. And then the person that can go with them, close family members. But I'm saying go in person because you'll get a foot in the door that way. I mean, it's too easy to reject the call and not call back because they get that little anxiety thing, like bill collectors calling or something. Yes, priest. So, because a lot of them aren't prepared to handle this stuff. And so, in other words, if they do decide to handle it, they don't know what to do. And the diocese might not have done a great job in passing this information on because there is no such office. So where are they going to find it? They're going to have to go searching on the web. One priest in New York actually told the person to get some sage. Oh, my gosh. Sage is not Christian, not Jewish, and you don't count Jewish mysticism and Crowley kind of stuff and Keys of Solomon and all that. That is not Christian. It's not Jewish. That is Jewish mysticism, which is Jewish witchcraft, basically. And I don't care if you find something in there that says that not a Christian used sage. It is pagan, and that they're not even using it in the same... it goes all the way back to the Romans, too, the Roman paganism. People are even doing it wrong from the Native American perspective, so stop doing it. Whatever you're getting is only an appeasement, because no denominations of faith whatsoever that aren't Christian are going to get anything but results that are either false flags or they are a method of appeasement, even when you don't realize it. So, if you bring in another demon to replace another, and that one actually has kind of a basic, cover that I feel lighter, I feel the house is clear, but it's still there wreaking havoc in your finances, or internally it's growing cancer inside you, you did not do a very good job. You just swap one problem for another is what they do. So be aware of that, all right? Just wanted to put that forth. Okay, back to the church. Yes, this one time we had a poltergeist case, and I'm not going to say that one time. I'm just talking about one case because it's happened more than once, and the priest was 85 years old. So I contacted them, and I felt so bad because the priest was so old. Gabriel Amor, to his last days, he was using a walker when he did his last exorcism. That's the way it really should be, but when priests are new to this stuff, and this is presented to them the first time being 85 years old, is not a good idea. They should send somebody who's younger, but not so less experienced that he's just going to go Dominus Omus, and then he's going to think that I did everything I could, like that. We're actually not getting that as much now. We're getting priests that are better prepared. This field, for some reason, is attracting people, which is strange. We got dragged into it kicking and screaming, so to speak. When people are called to this field, such as I think the priests are now, in part, there is a little bit of an unhealthy curiosity or something you want to solve your problem, something experienced. But for some reason, some of the priests are being introduced to the supernatural so that they may have private studies. In the seminary and so forth, all you people got to realize that when the PhDs come out of their school, they're not armed any more than any other priest is out of the seminary with this. There is no PhD demonology course. I know we had Dr. Bradshaw in here, and he learned it in the Middle East somewhere, but it's still not a very complete course anymore than that. It used to be 6 weeks course on exorcism offered by the International Association of Exorcism. That was a pretty full course. Now they split it up at just like a weekend here and there. So that's definitely a lot less. How many weekends are you going to have to do to make up for 6 entire weeks of being there? You used to get a hotel and you'd be there for 6 weeks. In some cases, like Father Lampert and Father Thomas from the right, both of them got to meet with a priest basically for a mentorship of a short time because they were there for the 6-week course. I don't know. You know what? I don't know if that's in existence anymore. It just seems like every time I hear the priest going to these conventions and so forth, and now there's 2 of them. There's one from the Leo XIII Institute, which actually tends to be a little more liberal, and then the International Association of Exorcists, who actually don't like that liberal side, and they won't work with that team. I would say stay away from the liberal stuff, because then you're going to get into the charismatic renewal and all this other stuff, which isn't deliverance, it's appeasement, just like it is with the sage. Okay, so you have gone to your priest, the priest that's local to you, which is what they're going to expect, that they should go to the local diocese parish first. In other words, like you got a church that's about 5 minutes from your house, that's the one to go to. It's like that's your jurisdiction. So you go to that priest first, call and set up an appointment. I would go there in person to see if you can catch the priest and then find out when a good time is and then go back and talk to them in person. Don't talk on the phone. It's too easy to reject phone calls. Don't make it easy for them. In one case in New York, there was a gal who was 20-something. It was like only 22, very young. And she had step-in possession. She would wake up is when you come to. Suddenly the demon is not there at the helm, and then you find yourself in the bathroom, and you're just standing there and don't remember what happened in the last 5 minutes. The last thing you do is remember calling your mother. That was what happened to this woman, and this is just as typical of these step-in cases. People aren't possessed 24/7 when they are possessed, as people will try to convey in movies. That it's always head spinning, pea soup, throwing up, vomiting, whatever, that kind of thing. And it's not consistent on that level that we can expect that even full possession will be going on 24/7. It's step-ins. It's going to step in when something triggers them. And that's, starts with oppression. It ends up being like that you can feel it coming in when some individual is oppressed. Even vexation, which is kind of an extreme temptation, a more severe, but not technically oppression yet. That's a coin that Father Lampert had coined, that terminology. We hear some of the top names, bring in and introduce some things. Back in the old days, it was so basic. There was this idea, I think it came from Ed Lorraine Warren, that there was only infestation, oppression, and possession. That's 3 stages out of how many real ones? Okay, so you go on the bottom, you got temptation, you got vexation, which I'm adding in there because that's a step between, And then you have, if it's going for an individual, you have obsession, subjugation, oppression, possession, which is when it's on the way to an individual possession instead of infestation, which may eventually take over the house, so to speak, and then it moves to those stages that I just mentioned in order to cause a possession to happen, or, push for it anyway. Because it's not like they can cause it. It's the individual spiritual meter of tolerance and so forth, and we'll just say their faculties that determine if or not they are going to be possessed or vulnerable enough to become possessed possibly. All right, as we move forward, so we're back to the office again, and so you got there in person, and as I said, go there and said you are indeed a spiritual warfare help. And if someone comes with you, that's great, because automatically, we want somebody who's not going to come in and they live alone, they're on disability, they're older and on medication. I'm sorry, but you bring in a host of problems, including some brands of psychological illnesses or medical. Typical, we get the anxiety and fear from the elderly. We get Alzheimer's, we get dementia, and a number of things, because the medication can cause hallucinations. Some of these people had strokes before, so they're not all there from that alone. And you'll get there and you'll find out they're on oxygen. They live alone because there's no one there to basically tell them this is your imagination. So support system is down. Why are they living alone to some degree? Some of them are actually kind of bitter, and their family members have not cut them off completely, but they avoid their contact with them. They don't live nearby on other circumstances. But so that's the profile, is that it can be scary for the priest or whatever if they understand what goes with this type of thing, senility and so forth. That if you come there with somebody, it'll be better to have somebody, like I said, don't bring Crazy Eddie, your friend, and it'd be better if you can bring a relative or somebody who better that they live with you so that they can help to clarify these things. When that priest went to this New York case of this young woman that I just told you about, but we had them follow a protocol. I said contact the priest and ask him to come over for dinner. And a lot of people aren't ready to host a priest or anything at a dinner. I said have them bless the house and then have them bless your girlfriend. Just say hey, could you bless my girlfriend too? She's not feeling herself. Well, I knew it was going to happen. It was going to provoke. But that's the thing. We had to have that happen. We had to have a priest because we didn't live in New York. And I couldn't just get over there for a minor case. I had to see what we can do beforehand, before going over there, for example, that this woman would be provoked if a priest would start doing some prayers over her with Jesus' name in it, because that's how bad it was getting. It wasn't getting violent. Luckily, it was one of those kind of more relaxed and non-violent, we'll kind of say. And that's what happens a lot. People got to realize, don't go by the mood and say it's a demon. So that's not a demon. That's just her Uncle Eddie taking her for a drive around the office. We got to remember that demons aren't going to always portray some violent and more obvious, malevolent personality or whatever. Got to pay attention to that. So what happened was, after dinner, the priest blessed the house, and when he got to the girl, he blessed her, and her eyes turned black, and she turned basically possessed. And he said, I'm not authorized to do this. She wasn't violent. I knew she wasn't, so I wouldn't have the priest go over there and then he's caught off guard or something like that. Because that's the benefit of having the years of experience, is that you have an assessment library of all these cases, and you'll know when the fingerprints and the footprints and the signs are there that it's going to be violent, to where the homeowner can't even bless their house because fear of retaliation, payback, or revenge for doing it, even if it occurs at night. We already had been through the trial and error to some degree. Okay, so with this priest, as he went on, he actually went from there to the bishop's office, and that was a good priest, and that was the protocol. That's what all the dioceses are supposed to do. You go to your bishop. The bishop will appoint somebody. Even in the old days, you had to call another diocese, and I used to have to travel cross-country because there was only 5 of them. Okay, so is that protocol all better now that we have so many diocese-appointed exorcists? Well, the initial steps are a little rougher, but it's a lot easier to get a priest over now because of their availability, but the problem still exists. How are you going to get them to your place, or how are you going to get to them, is another matter, because it's going to be filtered out. In the old days, there was a filtering basically done, by assessments teams such as us. We do all of the steps of the deliverance process. Even sometimes we have to do a deliverance. And in other cases, we will assist with exorcisms. But when people go through us, we help to assess all of this so that the exorcist is the next step. Now, you're not going to have that organization in a lot of dioceses. The exorcist himself may come out. And a lot of exorcists really aren't trained to do an assessment. Unfortunately, this takes up more of his time when he should be the closer, the person who goes there basically to finish the job. You're going to have to get through the scrutiny of the red tape of the church initially to begin with, just to get to that last step. But it will speed up, just like it did with that priest. It took a month. He put it in right away. And then the bishop's office responded in a month, and she got an exorcism, and she was good to go. They did a minor rite or major, I don't know. I didn't get that information when I talked, but that is a good thing to know. So what we're trying to make sure is that when you go to the bishop's office, secondly, and that's after you change parishes. See, sometimes this is the way it is when you're looking for a parish to be a Catholic and just to go to church. So you change parishes in such a way that you might actually find a parish, just like you won't find a priest that may not be good for you. Won't mean all of them are that way. So what you're going to have is that you may go through more than 3, and if you get discouraged, you got to try. See, if you don't, willing to help yourself, God's not going to help you. God helps those who help themselves. If you don't get off your head out there and try to do this yourself for the most part, if you're really, really bad shape, but don't surrender. The fact is that you're seeking for help. Your mind is there enough because they'll prevent you from making the phone calls, from getting emails. And I don't mean like, oh, I can't do this. No, I don't mean that. I don't mean like when a person's praying the Hail Mary and they can't get through it because it's so painful for the demons to hear Jesus' name and honor and veneration of Mary that it actually is an exorcism in itself. Will just say it because Jesus' name is in there. Some people will say the Our Father and Jesus' name's not mentioned. And the only line in there that's efficacious, you might say, but not much, is deliver us from evil, amen. Well, technically, people might say, hey, that's asking God to deliver us from evil, so it should have ran away. Well, not necessarily. Some of these solutions have to be direct. You got something right in front of you. The deliver us from evil part is in prayer basically for when you're on the front line and you're being attacked on the very moment, although it can be in some cases. But from personal experiences and from others, we don't recommend that. And that's one of the ways you can tell that priest. The parish priest will say to do an Our Father, and then you'll do it and it doesn't work, and then you'll be like, oh, great, he doesn't know what he's doing. That's pretty much where you're going to think about, because it's one size fits all, except that your demon might be bigger and badder than somebody else's that's in your house. And that prayers that work for one family is not going to work for another because it's more severe, that they did more to bring it in. They gave it more time to gain strength and to get badder and bigger. Okay, so if you can't get the parish priest to go along with it, like I said, go in person and go there and then say that you need some spiritual warfare counseling to keep it mild, and then let him hear your case. You know why? Because when you go to the next step that you have to, if you can't get it done with the priest, because the priest is supposed to go to bishop after you've done this. They're supposed to go to that office, and it's not supposed to take that long. It really should take only a month at the most. I'm not going to say it should normally take a month. The right things are done by the priest, and he doesn't need to know anything about spiritual warfare. He can go to his bishop, and then someone contacts you to have it investigated by the bishop's office in the least, and then from there it moves forward. But with the process of this whole thing, if you go to the bishop's office when the priest can't or do not help you by some means, you can say, I did go. They want to know that you've done those, that you're going to be cooperative. A lot of these cases, we get people who don't want to help themselves. They just want to be like, oh, can you lift my finger? I'm serious. And it's not because they're possessed. They're that way by default. So it makes you question the possession and everything because they're so... And, you're going to say, okay, possessed people. No, possessed people aren't that way. They're regulable a lot of times. Their psychological is that they need to go to work. I need to go to work, and this thing keeps interfering with my life, they'll tell you. And then when they're out of it, they're not some invalid, that's a shut-in and that's on drugs and medication and has no friends. So watch out for these profiles and don't use your human brain too much on something that's a totally different ballpark than what you're thinking you're experiencing. Okay, at the diocese office, you go to the bishop's office, And sometimes, like in an area, it'll be called the Catholic Center or the diocese offices because there'll be more than one building. In St. Louis, they have a whole park with different buildings. So you go find your way there and go there in person. And then if you have to schedule an appointment there and then come back, treat it like a doctor visit. It's not like you can call on the phone and they come out rushing over like the Brady Bunch. The doctor with the bag and his stethoscope going checking on little Cindy's cold. Can't believe they call a doctor for a cold before. It's like, good grief, it's not pneumonia. And achoo, oh no, Cindy's going to get sick. We better call the doctor and cancel our Hawaii trip. Anyway, TV hasn't gotten much better, folks. That's the thing about it. It's just as stupid. We don't run broadcast TV in our house. But when you're in on that step, and you're going to do the same thing when you get before the bishop's office, and it might not be the bishop, it might be the tribunal, who might be his interceptor, their aide. It might be their aide, who may not even be a priest. It could be a lady who has a degree in canon law or something like that, someone who's kind of versatile to be a minister of some offices, but not a job that needs to be a priestly role. That person's actually doing kind of the pre-investigation part. And this is, again, bring your roommate. Better it's a relative, not your roommate you've only been hanging out with for a year, or your girlfriend or whatever is living with you. You're going to give a red flag right there right away. By the way, living with somebody, it's always assumed that you are being immoral, that you are engaged in sinful sexuality, that you are going to be asked about that, because we call that mortal sin, like getting drunk purposely on Friday nights, stealing when it's swearing and some other stuff. Those are venial sins, although I think the GD word is much more serious than just saying F you. And those things won't play as much. It's the anger that's said doing it. And when you say GD and you say those curse words, you actually are cursing your household or whoever you might be talking to, your kids. So watch it. Don't curse your kids. Even though you just think it's you losing your temper, you're actually cursing them instead of blessing them. Bless your kids. Do not curse them. Bless your spouse. Do not curse them. Okay. Well, at you out at the bishop's office, you ask in the same exact way that, you want some spiritual warfare counseling. You need spiritual warfare counseling. There's some, like I said, people living alone versus not draws conclusions immediately. We have on the top of our form that we developed for the diocese that we use for intake, and ask all those questions in check boxes like PTSD, you ever served in the military, are you on any medication, do you live alone, are you on disability? All those questions are asked in the top because it red flags the whole thing immediately, and for, like I said, good reason. Okay, so as the process continues, you are being interviewed at the table. Now you're going to have to be patient and don't do the stuff, I need an exorcism now. I had a guy actually who was like that, and he wouldn't do anything we asked him to do. I need an exorcism. In other words, he demanded that we get him an exorcist and to get him out there, and then it's done, and then dun, right off in the sunset, that kind of thing. But it's Father Lampert and other exorcists have talked about this. We had them on our radio shows, and they talk about it in lectures. There is no magic bullet. You just can't order an exorcist to come out there and he takes care of it like an exterminator who blasts your house with fog. And that's what people go in there thinking, okay, so you're not going to change your living conditions? I know you love your fiance, but, if you're going to expect this to stick, I will not go over there even and more or less order an exorcist. We put in a request at the office, and it doesn't need to be investigated any further. It's because we already did all the legwork. And then the exorcist basically is going to be scheduled to come over, or they're going to have to go meet with the exorcist, depending on the circumstances. And that is basically, because we did all the legwork prior. And some dioceses don't have that ability, and the exorcist himself is the one who does his legwork. And they will work to get one to you as soon as possible, but hopefully you're in a diocese that actually has an exorcist. And the exorcist doesn't necessarily go in there and do the full ritual. They might do the minor rite instead of the major Roman ritual, the full rite, which I recommend they should do by default. I don't know why they refrain from doing the other one. Like, if it's necessary, let's do the other. Go in there and go to the bigger guns. There's more steps in there, so why refrain? I mean, there was one case, New Jersey, where the exorcist was actually doing the minor rite again and again and again and say, hey, why isn't this working? Because you didn't do the major rite. There's so many more steps in there. You're looking for signs and you get them. You don't necessarily get the top 4 ones that the Vatican likes to look for, as they say in the movies, the being able to speak other languages and the occult knowledge, like being able to identify there's a dollar in that purse on the movie The Right. That was just giving you an example there. All right, let's go back to our timeline here. We're taking forever to get there, folks. Okay, so the next phase, as you're talking to there, is they are going to recommend, unfortunately, if you got to that point and you didn't have somebody to come in there, such as me and my wife do, that diocese you may go to might rely on this person who just interviewed you, and we hope that they have the experience and the knowledge to properly assess. Now, demons go out of their great lengths to try to make sure that people think it's something psychological. And a lot of, we'll say the lesser experienced ones, that they will try to mimic all these paranoid schizophrenia, dissociative, or anything else to try to make you think that it's it's a psychological thing. It needs therapy or medicine and not an exorcist. And some of them might do that so that they can, basically wash their hands of this, and then because they don't want to deal with it anyway, because it scares them. The more physical activity, manifestations, and proof that you got, the better. The person goes under into time. I mean, we've seen a lot of cases where they don't go violent, such as one we encountered lately. And the other ones will just be kind of like they just babble and stuff like that, like they're going through the tongues kind of thing going on there. And that's not really something that's going to turn some opinions so much. They're going to think this guy's nuts. All right, we're going to get back to it now. We'll finish this, I promise. Okay, so when you're in there and the recommendation comes to that they're going to bring in exorcism, well, you figured you already did it. You're done. But the important thing is you got to remember that you have to do exactly as they tell you. We say that to people too. Do exactly what we tell you. And God helps those who help themselves, so you are expected by God in heaven to exactly what you were told. And you're also expected to not return to whatever form of sin that had brought you to that point, because there's almost always, I mean, in some cases you can't find it very easy, could it generational or something, whatever, like the breaking curses prayers. Curses come to people on so many levels that we try those to some great extent. We need to do a lot of different kind of things to basically clear the base level to make sure that everything is covered. All right, so I hope that covers the protocols. I bring it forward, so if there's any questions, put them in the comments below, and then we'll respond to them, or who knows. I don't think there's that much more to say. We'll give it a video for a second time to cover things that we missed. I think that covers pretty much the scenarios that we're looking at. It has a lot to do with your desire and your willing to go to the church. And then it's like, well, the priests don't believe me. Well, then you go and try another priest. Then you try another priest. Then you go to the diocese office. Now, at some point, you can go to us, and we can assess you, because we're in the office of exorcism here, and the offices kind of interconnect and close. One priest calls another from another country or anything. We're professed laity, but that wouldn't be enough alone to actually call and go, oh, I'm a Franciscan and my friend is possessed. That won't do anything. But when you're with the Office of Exorcism, you have credibility with that by default. So, and in short, don't give up hope, and don't be impatient. You can't rush these things. Don't expect to get an exorcism instantly, or because it's not normal for that to be done. It has to be gone over. This is a very deep topic, and that could be a mind, it could be a spirit at the same time. It could be several spirits. It could be because the drugs are taken. All of this needs to be gone over. No one should ever recklessly just go in and then do an exorcism, deliverance, or whatever on somebody, because you don't know what you're dealing with. And they may have brought it in. They might have a relationship with a demon. They might be having a succubus that visits them on occasion, and they don't mind it because they're alone and they like that kind of company, we'll just say. The strangest things you'll come in, and this is like, what? So you are a porn addict, and you failed to mention that? You kept pointing to your ghost hunting experiences before that. And the porn addict, yeah, that's definitely something that's going to push it right up there with the occult. Immorality, when you practice the occult and immorality, guess what knocks on your door? Succubus, incubus. You just let it in. With the occult practices, you open the door for something that you brought to the door, and you let it in. Okay, God bless everybody. Let's just end this, and I'll just say have a good evening or good morning, day, or whatever may apply. And I'll see you next time, or rather, you'll see me on the Art of the Deals. Take care. Deals. Take care. Deals. Take care. Deals. Take care. Deals.